Call the meeting to order. I guess I'll start with roll call for the Parks Board and then hand it off. Is it Stacy? You're going to do it for the Environmental Board. And real quick, one thing I was thinking about when we decided to have this is our meetings are very casual and generally not terribly, I don't want to say passionate, but they don't get heated. So we don't need to raise our hands or anything. We just have a dialogue. But for this meeting, I think you guys do this for when you want to speak. So we can all do this when you want to speak, and then the folks online can raise their hand. Okay, so real quick, I'll call roll. Katie Bell.
Here.
Thank you. Andrew Eloquent. We'll see if he makes it later. I am here, Chris Kovac, and Nicholas Lee. David Liu has an excused absence. Tim Motley. May have some people joining us at like 7 o'clock or something.
It's possible.
I'm thinking about it now. Brenda Spears.
Here.
Zach Zabluski.
Here.
And Marlene Waxy.
Here. Sorry to be virtual. The 6:30 got me. I knew I wouldn't make it, so.
Yeah, it kind of got me too. Crept up. And then Brad Book.
Here.
And
I'm
Andrew. Thank you. Andrew Myers. Somebody's walking in. It looks like Andrew Eloquent. Thank you.
Andrew's here.
And I see that Tim Motley joined. Andrew, they call Andrew Myers. And then Ryan Olson here. And I'll hand it over to you.
All right, for the Environmental Board, Tom Anderson.
Here.
Nancy Davidson.
Here.
Jamie Finch.
Here.
Raj Gapandi has an excused absence. Joy Lewis has an excused absence. Ashwin Kanan. Ashwin was to join. Ashwin Manakaran. Don McWilliams.
Here.
Ann Newcomb.
Here.
Janet Wall.
Here.
Dixie Bear has an excused absence, and Alex Lee Tigner.
Here.
And then don't believe we anticipate any action items, but it looks like we have enough people for a quorum if that were to arise. And we're going to skip the approval of the minutes for the special meeting. And so we're going to move right into public comments. People wishing to speak.
No, I don't see anyone virtually. And we don't have anyone in person, but we did have a couple of public comments that were sent by email to both boards, and both of those will be included in the minute.
Well, I guess with that, we'll move on to regular business, which is an urban forest management plan update presented by Dan, followed by a park system plan update presented by Robin. So with that, over to you, Dan.
Great. Thanks, Chris. I think I've met mostly everyone in this room, but my name is Dan Hintz. I'm the Urban Forest Supervisor, City of Issaquah within our Parks and Community Services Department. Hopefully you all have some baseline on the Urban Forest Management Plan and kind of more in general, our urban forestry program that we've been building out. I was just chatting with a few of you. This is about a year into my time with the city in this first role as Urban Forest Supervisor or first person in this role, I should say. So we met with both of these boards separately. I believe it was Park Board in October, Environmental Board in November. Really is just kind of an introduction to the Urban Forest Management Plan process. So kind of core parts of an urban forestry program are having a management plan, looking at kind of long-term, often a decade out, planning for, maintenance coordination around our existing tree canopy and really how we can continue to enhance and build out that tree canopy in our forest here in Issaquah. And that's really kind of the first big step. After that, I'll kind of tease, we're looking at tree inventories and then also staffing positions like myself and our Green Issaquah coordinator, park ranger, to really be able to implement some of these programs as well. So This is looking to be about a year-long process. We started this back up with our consultant Planet Geo. I'll hand it off to Chris here in just a moment. He'll be presenting to you all here this evening. Over the last few months, and we'll get a quick recap of this, we've done a lot of internal stakeholder engagement. So really working with city staff across departments and really gauging kind of what the needs are around working with trees in Issaquah. So Chris will have a brief update on that, but then we're really kind of excited to be shifting gears here over the next month or two into the public engagement, community engagement process for our urban forest management plan. So in the packet, you all should have the slides and a draft of our public survey that we're hoping to get posted and sent out in the next couple of weeks. We'll be working with our communications teams and Planet Geo to get that translated and get that all ready to go out there. So we hope that everyone at a bare minimum fills that out when that's ready. But tonight we'll have a little time to discuss. We've already met with a handful of people from the park board on an early draft of this with our communications team, with some other park staff. So we hope it's pretty close. And, keep in mind, we're trying to balance a survey that is accessible to a wide array of the community, not necessarily the people that are, maybe as obsessed with trees as I am, or kind of in the environmental side of things. So trying to kind of balance, enough detail to really help guide our vision for our urban forest here in Issaquah, and really trying to kind of prioritize some of the key theme areas as it relates to how we work with our forest. But not getting so into the weeds that it's going to, turn someone off from taking this survey. So, we're really hoping this is something people can complete in about 10 minutes. And then if there are, areas that you really want to kind of elaborate, there's, ways to kind of put in written responses, and then, I'll be available to follow up with people as well. So we'll be really just kind of introducing that public engagement process. And then a few other updates, moving forward, likely the next time we'll come back to will be in the late spring, early summer with, drafted goals and strategies that will then build out into our urban forest management plan. So, we're still looking at having this completed by September of this year, and hopefully adopted by council at the end of 2024. So that's just kind of a little introduction, but I'm going to hand it over to Chris Pfeiffer with Planet Geo, our consultant. Jumping on this call, and like I said, Chris will guide us through. And Chris, sorry, I didn't have a chance to ask you about this, but are you okay with questions throughout, or do we want to kind of go through the whole presentation and save them for the end?
I'm open to either. Typically, questions at the end. I'm going to try to keep the presentation brief so that we can get into detail. But if there's something urgent, I'll field those questions throughout the presentation. But good either way, honestly. Okay.
Like I said, we should have a good chunk of time to discuss afterwards, but if there's something that really kind of feels right in the moment, feel free to raise your hand, or people virtually raise your hand. Yeah, Chris,
that sounds good. Sometimes, sure, yeah, sometimes the content on the slide is easier just to raise the question as it, comes up. So definitely flexible there. And yeah, if we're good to go and you all can see the title slide, we'll get rolling with the presentation. And so before getting into things, I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to present on the status of Issaquah's first ever urban forest management plan. And Dan did a really good job of highlighting kind of the key topics for this discussion. And I'll have a really quick overview of our agenda for the presentation. But it really comes down to sitting down with you all to get an understanding and considerations going into the external engagement phase. And we'll cover some of the processes there and the findings from the urban forest management planning process so far. And so to start off, just want to give a brief introduction. As Dan mentioned, my name is Chris Pfeiffer. I'm the Director of Urban Forestry Consulting Services at Planet Geo. And for this project, I'm the project manager and going on 10 years at Planet Geo coming in October. And so for this project, I'm leading the internal engagement synthesis and the external engagement exercises, and providing senior level insights and reviews during the development of the plan strategies, the recommendations, and the overall final product, the final roadmap for urban forest sustainability. And of course, I want to recognize my planning team on Planet Geo's side with Alex Hancock, who is an urban forestry climate consultant and an APA planner focused on canopy goal setting, policy, and sustainability. And we also have Matt Urmson, an urban forestry planner, who's really just supporting all aspects of the planning process. And then, as you all know, Dan is the project lead on the city's end and really just been very helpful in coordinating this process as we wrapped up the internal engagement and really wrapping up the research and analysis phase of the project. And so for this presentation, we'll cover the key items listed on this slide, from the internal and external engagement processes and the findings to the connections with other city plans, as well as the results of a draft riparian area canopy study. And so, like I said, I'll keep the presentation high level so that we have enough time for a summary of next steps and really get into open discussion. Like we said, really getting your insights into the external engagement process, considerations, and what information would be helpful along the way as we develop the plan. And so starting off on this presentation, I'm going to share with you some key findings from our internal engagement exercises. And at this stage, this is included an online survey and a series of follow-up meetings. And on this slide, we're talking about the internal stakeholder survey that was completed. And engaging with city staff enabled us to identify existing workflows, roles and responsibilities, along with those shared concerns, challenges, and priorities across different themes and different departments. And we also started to uncover desired outcomes of this planning effort, as well as the future programs for the trees in Issaquah. And these activities have engaged staff from various city departments, as shown on the right side of the screen. And the engagement for the survey was in October and November of last year. And the follow-up meetings were held mostly at the middle of December and then beginning of January. And for the survey, I want to point out that we had one of the highest response rates for these types of projects. And I've added up the numbers. It's over 400 city staff that I've interviewed, but with Issaquah, an 80% response rate for the survey, which is a really good telling sign that, the city's ready for this type of management plan. So just want to thank, everyone getting the word out about, participating in this effort. And so on the previous slide, I mentioned that the engagement with city staff help us to identify, the common challenges and priorities around trees in the city. And based on the survey of 41 staff, we found that they represented 5 core departments, and we identified the primary roles, which include activities and services related to infrastructure maintenance and repair, vegetation and landscape maintenance and management, and enforcement of city codes, ordinances, and risk management services. And when asked to describe the primary challenges related to trees in Issaquah, most responded with either utility-related infrastructure conflicts or mobility and visibility-related infrastructure conflicts, as well as unclear delineation of roles across departments and programs. And this is because we're finding that many programs interact with public and private trees in the city. And so clarifying roles and responsibilities may be something that the plan addresses. We also have other notable challenges in the bottom right relating to climate-related impacts, monitoring and enforcing ordinances, and strengthening partnerships. We also asked about the priorities related to the trees and what the plan may address. And participants mostly recognized the need to better implement best practices for trees, develop goals that address climate and sustainability, and growing more trees throughout the city. But what's important there is recognizing that there needs to be a plan in place and the resources to maintain them. So as we look to increase tree canopy cover, what are the resource requirements and the right types of trees going in so that they're resilient and sustainable and you grow, a healthy urban forest? We also looked at the possible desired outcomes of the urban forest management plan. And most participants would like to see, again, a plan for public tree maintenance, public tree inventory data to support management, identifying priorities, service demands, the benefits associated with trees, and also the resources for proactive tree care. So that's just a real high-level summary of the responses from the 41 staff. But then we get into a more granular level of engagement with the follow-up interviews. And so this expands on some of those survey responses, and we had a more focused discussion with various city staff across departments. And again, this was held in middle of December and then wrapped up beginning of January. And we organized these meetings into 3 different themes, including climate resiliency, integrating plans, policies, and practices, and tree conflicts and risk management. And what's nice about organizing themes is we don't just meet with one department who talk amongst themselves. We bring in multiple programs and departments. So there's this cross-sharing of information and ideas and starting to see where things align or where there are potential gaps. And so with staff representing multiple departments, we created this space again for that resource and information sharing, identifying coordination opportunities, and really just sharing concerns and ideas around trees in the city. So as of today, we have the notes drafted for these meetings, and we'll be sharing those with the participants so that they can weigh in on anything else they'd like to add around their responses or correct any kind of misinterpretations of the notes. And then once that's all completed, what's really important is synthesizing what we've uncovered from all of these discussions with city staff. What are the current workflows or the gaps? How can we leverage strengths to address challenges and really just incorporate that into the plan strategies? And so in addition to gathering those insights from internal stakeholders, the planning process also includes public education and the gathering of viewpoints and priorities from external stakeholders. And so just at a high level, covering the process for public engagement or external engagement. And really this is guided by an engagement strategy that we drafted, and then we revised based on city communications review and input. And this strategy is guiding the education, the engagement sessions, and some of these range from social media, messaging campaigns, web content or website updates with relevant information, an online public survey that we mentioned that's in draft form right now, and public meetings and board presentations such as these, which will gather all the information from those engagement sessions, analyze, summarize, and interpret the findings so that really the ultimate goal of the engagement is to identify a shared vision for trees, raise awareness, start to build that network of community tree stewards, and really be centralized around a message for urban forestry, and that folks have a go-to place for more information about trees in Issaquah. So when we look at the status of various external engagement exercises, at this stage, the planning, messaging, and draft public survey have been completed. And like we said, we're looking for input on the survey to finalize. And we've had various stakeholders weigh in on some of the questions like Dan had mentioned. And once we get final input, we'll be taking this to the communications team where there will be language translations, and it will be uploaded to the city's Typeform platform which is how other surveys at the city have been launched in the past. And then for the public meetings, materials and messaging will be made available at various community events like the Sustainability Fair on March 30th and other community events, because we find that we get greater participation and a diverse group of participants when we go to those local events rather than some of those traditional open house settings. And so on this slide, like I said, we're going to incorporate the feedback that you all share on the survey this evening. And then we're looking to have that go live in time for the Sustainability Fair so that as that event is being tabled, we have an action item for folks that visit, to follow up on the survey and to share initial findings and some key messaging around the urban forest. And so what I want to focus on now is more details around the public survey so that you're informed and can weigh in, and that we can keep moving along with our schedule for public engagement. And this is where, as I mentioned, we gathered input from a variety of stakeholders. Some of those are listed here on the slide. We've also incorporated demographic questions from past city surveys, so that'll help for comparing responses over time and identify potential gaps in our outreach approaches so that we can improve upon our engagement sessions going forward. And here, the primary objectives of the survey are to share our initial findings, an educational component to this, gather public perceptions and gain insights into, the public's understanding of the urban forest and its related programs, and really ultimately identify that shared vision for trees in Issaquah. So the draft survey, again, going into a little bit more detail, currently has 20 questions, and they're organized into 5 themes that are listed on this slide. And the themes are organized, again, to bring attention, maybe get the participants thinking about how they interact with trees, also to gather input on the vision for the urban forest, and learn how participants would like to stay engaged and informed about the project and ongoing related topics. We also then gather information about the demographics of the participants. And as we stated earlier, we're looking to launch this survey in March and then remain open until after Arbor Day, which would be mid-April. And then with upcoming events in the city, we'll provide more opportunities to get the word out and to gather input. So, but in addition to the survey and the community events, we're also looking to engage with stakeholders throughout the city and the region. And these are just some of the examples that are listed at the bottom of the slide. But that's also an opportunity to weigh in. Neighborhood associations, different community groups that provide different perspectives around trees in the city. And lastly, just giving a brief overview of the questions in case you haven't had a chance to review the survey. And so the next series of bullets are just summarizing the types of questions. And so we have questions that cover experiences and issues with trees, questions that ask participants to envision what Issaquah's future urban forest may look like, the management related priorities, educational materials and resources of interest, new or revamped initiatives and actions. We also look at gathering viewpoints related to private tree planting programs, and we can discuss that more later. But one quick note on that is that, we find a lot of tree canopy cover is on private property, as well as the opportunity for more tree plantings. So community groups may help with addressing private property, not so much on the city's end, but through partnerships, looking for that network of tree stewards. We also include an opportunity for participants to add, open comments, and then again, the demographic questions so that we know our audience and can adjust strategies accordingly. So that's a wrap up of the external engagement process, and we'll be looking for feedback. But what I'd like to just cover here briefly now is how this urban forest management plan is looking to align with other city planning efforts that are already in place or are occurring concurrently with this planning effort. So I'm sure many of you are aware of the draft environmental stewardship and climate resiliency policies for the city's comprehensive plan. What we're looking to do is see how our strategies that we develop based on internal and external engagement, our research and analysis, alignment with best practices, see how that can align with the comprehensive plan. And what we find with the comprehensive plan's elements is that there are key urban forestry elements within it, such as the ones starred on the screen, green infrastructure, increasing green spaces and tree canopy cover, and disaster preparedness. So as the management plan strategies begin to take shape, we're going to look to coordinate across planning efforts so that both plans complement one another and that we don't have conflicting priorities. And another example is the city's climate action plan, or Issaquah's climate action plan and ICAP, which calls for 55% tree canopy cover citywide by 2035. And the urban forest management plan is looking to leverage the ICAP strategies to provide urban forestry specific guidance and recommendations that support expanding tree canopy cover, preserving tree health, expanding climate resilient natural landscapes, promoting water efficiency, possibly through the right tree species for the sites, and also improving stormwater management. And lastly, on this table on the far right column, the ICAP also calls for aligning with other city plans and programs, strengthening or establishing partnerships, and to address tree canopy preservation, protection, and replacement in the city's land use code. So there is already a foundation from which the management plan is going to build upon. We are not starting from scratch. It's great to see these other plans already discussing tree canopy cover and the urban forest and canopy cover goals and the natural environment as a whole and the vital component that tree canopy provides to urban ecosystems. Not all cities have this good foot forward on urban forest management planning. So it was something that we really wanted to highlight here, and we'll make sure as we develop the strategies in the plan that, again, they align. And so, like I said, we can expand on the connections of the urban forest management plan with other city plans during our open discussion. But the last few slides are just going to touch briefly on the draft results of the recent high-resolution tree canopy study that was done for the riparian areas across Issaquah. So as we look to develop strategies, as well as understanding the baseline conditions of the urban forest, the tree canopy cover, along with other land cover classes and possible planting areas, were assessed using high resolution imagery and GIS processes. And we understand that, tree canopy cover has a great impact on water quality and cooling effects, creating, wildlife corridors and habitats and organic matter. And so riparian areas are really vital to this holistic approach to urban forest management. And this high resolution tree and land cover assessment was completed for the primary waterways as discussed during the data collection phase. And that's Issaquah Creek, East and North Forks of Issaquah Creek, Laughing Jacobs Creek, Lewis Creek, and Tibet's Creek. So like I said, the tree canopy cover provides, vital components to healthy waterways and riparian areas. And so we need to understand the extent of canopy cover, the different ownership types, looking at vulnerabilities and susceptibility to pest and disease, climate change, development pressures, things like that, because not only do street trees and park trees contribute to the environmental, social, and economic benefits, but all trees across Issaquah. And so as we look to develop strategies around riparian areas, this will really complement and support, the strategies in Issaquah's comprehensive plan, as well as the climate action plan. So it's a really great to see that the city prioritized a riparian area study as part of the urban forest management plan project. And so last thing I'll do is just summarize some of our initial findings from that riparian area study. And so for each water body, the existing tree canopy cover, available planting space, and areas where new trees were not suitable were assessed. So the charts are showing some key findings that we're going to dig in a little bit deeper during the development of the plan. One thing to note is, Laughing Jacobs Creek has the highest proportion of tree canopy cover, with 78% of the riparian area covered with tree canopy. But when you look proportionally, it has the second lowest amount of possible area for new plantings. So like I said, this is like a tier 1 analysis of the findings, but it starts to look at where those obvious opportunities or restrictions are when looking at canopy preservation or planting. We also look at North Fork Issaquah Creek, which has the lowest proportion of tree canopy cover with 54%, but has a relatively high amount of available space for new trees. So that's a starting point, but we know there's going to be on the ground, type of assessments to see what is not only possible, but what is feasible and preferable for, tree plantings going forward? What partnerships, who has the authority for preservation or planting on different areas within the riparian corridors, looking more closely at not just the assessment, but getting into the action. And so the management plan is going to provide guidance around tree canopy preservation and planting. And we're going to lay out recommendations on how to address priority planting areas or what to look at in terms of different programs and initiatives going forward. I did also want to mention that this study of riparian areas also included a canopy cover change analysis. It looked at the 2017 and 2021 time periods, and that's going to really help us to look into those possible causes of canopy cover changes, gains or losses, and what are the implications or potential strategies to address why the canopy has changed in various riparian areas over time. And so last thing I wanted to point at is this study supports a critical objective of the management plan, which is to look holistically at the urban forest and then to develop strategies that support the entire urban ecosystem and the goals for urban forest sustainability and climate resiliency. And so just one last note, there's, we're looking at urban tree canopy cover, but other themes such as addressing urban heat or reducing stormwater or connecting wildlife corridors and salmon habitat recovery. So having this data is really going to be a solid starting point, plus the urban tree canopy assessment that was done citywide a few years ago. We have that data as well to work with. And the riparian area is just a more recent, more granular study that we'll utilize. So that concludes the presentation of the planning process and our initial findings. I covered the internal and external engagement processes and results and included a request for input on the public survey and public meetings. I then touched on the draft environmental element of the comp plan and the city's climate action plan and how the management plan will align or support with these policies and goals. I then briefly covered the riparian area canopy study that was completed as part of this project. And so at this time, I'd like to share the next steps with you, which includes finalizing the public survey and planning, especially for the sustainability fair coming up on March 30th, and applying our research, our analyses, and our engagement findings as we develop the draft strategies for the plan. And so we're going to turn it over for open discussion. I'm going to see if Dan has any other comments or additional information to share. But I did want to mention that, over the last 10 years, I've been fortunate to work on about a little over 40 of these urban forest management planning projects. And I think it's helpful to say, what stands out to me about this project for Issaquah. And some of the things I identified was the extensive amount of planning efforts underway at the city, the coordination across departments and teams that we've uncovered during the internal stakeholder meetings, really the strong emphasis on climate resiliency and public engagement, having a strong communications plan, and the holistic approach to urban forest management. And lastly, the responsiveness and participation from stakeholders. So just want to give a brief recap on where we're at, what we're finding, how the process has been going, working with the city, and just really want to thank you all for this opportunity and for listening in. And I'll turn it over to Dan for any other remarks around the presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chris. I don't have much to add other than maybe just a little bit more context on the riparian study. Obviously some of the interest in that was certainly around our salmon recovery efforts. So those are our 5 sort of primary salmon bearing streams. Also working with our Public Works Department and our stormwater permits. Department of Ecology is going to be requiring more and more riparian planning and kind of goal setting in terms of, essentially viewing that as green infrastructure for stormwater management. So this kind of gets us ahead of that curve a little bit too. So there's going to be some good efforts aligned with Public Works, who manages our NPDES, National Pollutant discharge elimination service. I should be looking at Don for that one. Hopefully I got that right. System, it's not service. System. Did I get that? Thanks, Don. So you know that we have to submit, and this is stuff that's coming down the line probably a few years from now, but this puts us in a really good position to start kind of building this data out too for benefits our trees have in areas that do receive a lot of storm.
Hey, Dan, maybe super fast. Again, look forward to open discussion and Q&A, but maybe, and thank you, Chris, for the overview. I know as we've talked engagement with so many of other interest groups, the tribes have been a key group we've been engaging with. So I just maybe touch on that.
Yeah, thank you. And then, yeah, Chris, sorry, that's something I could have synced up with you on earlier, but primarily we've been working with the Snoqualmie Indian tribe through their government affairs manager coordinator. I'm not exactly sure her title, Jamie Martin. They actually just hired a tribal forester, which is really exciting. So I'll be meeting with her in the next couple of weeks to just kind of check in on this planning effort, other ways we could overlap. You've both heard about our heritage tree program. Snoqualmie tribe still very interested in building out more resources for municipalities on culturally modified trees. So that is something we've had preliminary conversations. They seem to probably be most interested in engaging once we're kind of at that goal strategy kind of recommendation phase. So not by any means a final draft, but kind of where there's a little bit more substance to provide feedback on. And now that they have a forester, there could even be a little bit more engagement specifically around that. So that's kind of been our primary focus on the tribal front too. So thanks, Chaz.
Yeah, thank you.
Nancy.
So I have comments about the engagement and then general comments about the plan. So in terms of the engagement piece of this, it seems to me some key stakeholders are not being, that I'm aware of from this presentation, being included. They would include like the school district, PSC, state parks in King County. And they all own large portions of land within the city or right next to the city. And PSC regularly butchers our trees in the city. I see them do it quite well. They're good at it. So it seems to me, in addition to talking about just engagement of the citizens here, we need to be talking about more engagement of major landowners in the community, many of whom have trees that need to be managed. So that's an engagement piece. And if we're not engaging them, just going to the landowners, citizens of the city, we're missing a big piece of people that have influence on trees in the community. So those are my engagement comments. Can I go to general comments now? I'm going to switch.
Yeah, I'm happy to reply to that, but I can wait too.
Well, let me just finish and then you can get it all. Okay?
Yep.
It seems to me that one of the things I've noticed in wandering around the city is we're missing a big piece of the urban forest management plan. And it's not just trees. It's the understory. It's the getting rid of the blackberries. It's the vinca and the other stuff that's out there that's not very good for our trees. And the survey should also include, so at least people, if they're thinking about trees, they're also thinking about things they can do to improve the overall condition of our forests or our green canopies. So I did not note any questions about blackberries, non-native species, things like that. The second piece about it that I would like to say is that when you're engaging the public like this, it would be great if you're asking them for these kind of questions, if you had a place to point them so that they know how to pick the right trees to go into their spots, how to prune their trees. Man, we not only PSC butchers trees, but Joe Blow citizens do a great job too, but the watering and management of them and kind of what they need to protect their roots and to be healthy. And even if it's on the website, if you've got their attention, they're thinking about trees in the understory, if they have a place to go on the website to learn more about how to handle the trees in their own yard or in their neighborhood, I think you have an opportunity to touch the citizens in a different way and make your message a little bigger. So that's my general comment. Sorry, Dan, but you probably want to respond, but I apologize. It's good to get it all out at once.
No, that's great.
Thank you, Nancy.
Well, maybe I'll respond to the first part on groups, and we really appreciate that. Yes, I mean, as Chris kind of hinted at, that was certainly not an all-inclusive list up there. PSC and Bonneville, though, those are ones that I'll admit have been a little off my radar and really good recommendations and trying to get contacts there. Issaquah School District, absolutely. I've already connected with their lead arborist for kind of the landscaping on the groundwork, and then also have a few connections on the school district board too. So they'll definitely be contacted, essentially will be obviously providing the survey and then opportunities to meet and chat further, should people want to take us up on that option. So HOAs being a big one, especially focused on some of our bigger homeowners associations that have large native growth protection areas or easement areas. So Taliesin, Issaquah Highlands come to mind right away, but there's plenty others like the Woods, like Summer Hill, South Cove, even where there's privately managed forest areas, not just individual trees. So that's definitely something. And Chris, we haven't talked about this, but I was just kind of brainstorming, if that's something we're offering as a meeting to bring multiple HOAs together at once, there could be some interest around that, or at the very minimum, providing the survey and the opportunity to meet and speak in person or through a virtual meeting. So, and then other agencies.
If you go to those HOAs, they can potentially get it out to their community as well.
Absolutely. So newsletters, their networks, but then their leadership, like Taliesin and IHCA, Issaquah Highlands Community Association, each have their own maintenance people that are focusing on tree work, whether they're specifically arborists or not, they're doing a lot of that work, both on the maintenance, planting and permitting side too. So kind of, already starting to build some of those connections with the bigger ones, but yes, there's more to do there and to tap into networks. And then agencies, absolutely as well. State parks, I'm on the Friends of Lakes Manor State Park Board, so I am definitely kind of been nudging in that direction to get some feedback there, both, from staff on the ground with this region of state parks, and then, kind of more broadly as well. And then King County, I've also been surveying on, they've just kind of built up a urban forestry forum, and actually they're developing a lot of resources that I think that, you're kind of hinting at that we could do a much better job providing here in Issaquah. In terms of some of that, even fairly basic information on, kind of you're saying right tree, right place, and then certainly some of the maintenance needs too. So all those things are on our radar. I'd say the utilities is one that I think I need to figure out a little bit better. But, in terms of other public agencies, DNR as well, with the amount of bordering land we have on Tiger Mountain with the states there too. So I would be curious to hear Chris's opinion. I guess I can provide my 2 cents specifically on the kind of the more holistic understory invasive species approach. Chris, if you have kind of a thought on that. We haven't spoke about this, but to me, we can probably do a pretty good job, at least to get started, connecting it back to the Green Issaquah 20-year implementation plan. That plan itself was essentially a 1,500 acre analysis on, current forest composition and invasive species threats to our parks and open spaces. So it's a fairly simple matrix in there, but they're looking at, forest cover with a mix of, how the age and the, conifer deciduous breakdown. And then they're also looking at cover of invasive species. And, they use it. It's a, I'm blanking on the consultant that we worked with on that one. Forterra, but then Forterra contracts with like Cascade Forest Management or something like that does these. And they've essentially built this little matrix that looks at areas to kind of prioritize. Obviously, as much as we like to think going after the worst of the worst areas, sometimes that's maybe not worth the, essentially areas that have no existing forests and nothing but weeds. Finding some of those areas in the middle ground is what that plan often kind of prioritizes, protecting the mature intact forest that doesn't have much non-native vegetation, figuring out what we can do with some of those areas that are very significantly degraded, but then those areas that are more in the middle that are kind of the threat of losing forest canopy, that we can maybe do some better enhancement work with maybe less of the dollars and resources to do some of those areas that are in really bad shape. And then, certainly tying it back to riparian critical areas where we have some of these other ecosystem lifts in terms of the invasive species kind of control work we're doing. Yeah, I acknowledge that is missing at this point. I definitely think we will be, including that. And I'd say a lot of the areas that I can say personally I'm working on right now is areas along Issaquah Creek that were planted 15, 20 years ago. We've done a really good job lifting initial tree canopy, but then there is that kind of void underneath, in terms of ground covers, understory species, and kind of providing that forest structure. Really looking at edge of forest and pollinator habitats is something we're really trying to do on a smaller scale right now, but how we can really build that out too. And edge of forest is often where we see blackberry still hanging on, where there's enough sunlight, and trying to figure out species that would be better complement to our native pollinators too is something that, I'm personally really interested in. So doing that on a smaller scale, but hoping this plan can kind of inform those as, goals and strategies at a kind of increased scale.
Planning on adding any of that to the, just to follow up, are you gonna add any of that to the survey since it is part of the forest plan, since there isn't anything about the understory and, you know, how to protect that, or what, getting people informed that it's.
I think Chris and I need to talk about that, but I definitely think there's, whether that's a full question or something we can incorporate in some of the existing questions on, threats or challenges with the forest, around maintenance needs, issues like that. Chris and I will be probably chatting tomorrow, and trying to make some of these revisions in the next couple of days so we can get this out. But yeah, maybe I'll let you jump in there, Chris.
Yeah, I'll keep my response brief in case there are more questions. I will say, like, we're looking at existing tree lists, what is approved or recommended, because as many of you may know, native trees or regionally native trees really support biodiversity and habitats, and looking at wildlife and other ecosystem benefits related to that. So that's one component. The canopy assessments can really look at those, forest edges. That's oftentimes the interface for where invasives begin and then proliferate. One thing I will say is that, the focus of the urban forest management plan is on public trees, with looking at public street trees and trees in maintained areas of parks, which tend to have less understory, and it's probably recommended not to have turf, have a mulch ring around. But then when we look at a holistic approach for urban forest management, when you look at the riparian areas and woodlots, that's where we get into leveraging other resources, the park system plan update, the plan that Dan shared, partners, looking at efforts and where we can make recommendations for improving things to address understory or invasives and supporting ecosystems. So like Dan said, more to discuss on that, but just want to share my perspective on it. So it's a topic that comes up often with these plans, and we just want to make sure we have an effective approach then.
Got 2 questions online. And Tom, I see your hand was up first, and then Anne.
Also got 2 pending over here.
Great, thank you. Tom Peterson here. First, an easy question. Is this a riparian canopy study document? Is that available to the public at this point?
Not yet, Tom. It's still pretty preliminary, but obviously we hope to make that more publicly available here soon.
Is that like in the next few weeks or something like that, or what's your time?
Probably more so months, I would say, as it's kind of informing some of the initial goal strategies. But Chris might be able to speak to that better. But I wouldn't say weeks.
Okay. So just to help me kind of understand how this would be applied, I'd like to just use a couple of examples of parcels that I know, city property owned, that formerly was single-family residences along the creek, like on Front Street South. There's a few houses there that were removed, and those lots are now parkland. And then further south a bit, the former Hope property. Okay, so here's some parcels that seem to me to be ripe for this sort of analysis and planning. And I've wondered, well, hey, why hasn't that lawn area been replanted? Both in terms of the health of the aquarian corridor there, the creek, they could benefit from trees and also understory plants, and then the overall benefits of the tree canopy in terms of climate resilience, etc. So are these the kind of parcels that will be included in the plan and dealt with?
I would say absolutely. And to Chris's point, that's where we have the most opportunity, is on those publicly managed parcels like that. I think it's a conversation, obviously working with Robin here, our parks planning manager team, on just, what future use for some of these lands look like. A lot of them are obviously not real developable at all, and, really are best suited for kind of, passive recreation, if anything, and conserved habitat restoration work. But I'm really hoping too, Tom, this informs work we can, as Chris kind of mentioned, whether that's through community partners like Mountains of Sound Greenway Trust, or actually working with sustainability and David Reedy a bit right now on what a kind of tree giveaway incentive program on private property would look like, and how we can target outreach to maybe prioritize that in riparian areas, not be exclusive to riparian areas, but know that that's where there's a lot of good opportunity and kind of overall lift in terms of ecosystem benefits. So really looking at twofold for, strategies that we have a little bit more direct opportunity on public land, like you said, the Hope parcel, some of the Front Street parcels, stuff like that. And then, where we can try to do our best to educate and incentivize on private land as well.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
And do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Hey, I just want to say, way to go. This is a beautiful plan, and we're so lucky to live in a city that creates great plans like this. And I love that it seems like we're thinking more about incorporating private property to help out with tree canopy and things like that. And I know Bellevue, you probably know that Bellevue has a program where they're giving, thousands of trees away to the public. So I thought that was a great question to explore what will work best for Issaquah. And then there's also, there's other agencies out there that are already educating people on how to create a healthy forest, like DNR and potentially King County. So I'm just thinking, like, can we save energy by piggybacking with some of those? So if you do end up wanting to educate the public on how to create healthy forests on their own property, how to do it without, with less energy for the city. And I just want to reiterate the understory that Nancy brought up and Dan was talking about. So I working with the Green Issaquah. I've definitely seen that, it's already happening. There's a lot of understory that gets planted whenever we plant trees. So I guess the reason, and I feel like it's extremely important for the health and diversity, and also to hold back the invasives once, we spend a lot of time getting those invasives out. And so we need a lot to be able to plant a lot of understory, because we can't plant the trees super close together. So we need to be able to plant a lot of understory. So the reason that I think it's important to have it in these plans is because I think it could help with grants. So if it's not written in the plan, it might not get funded. So thank you so much for looking at this. And just one more thing that I'm thinking of for both this plan and the parks plan. So you've got the connections to other cities' plans where it overlaps with the comprehensive plan. And there's a circle with mitigation and a circle with adaptation, and then where the overlap is. So I see one more place that we could be overlapping, and that's clean energy. So we could have more distributed energy, like solar in our parks, either on roofs, or maybe there's some open space someplace where we can't plant trees, where some solar panels could go. But definitely on all the roofs all around, I think there's quite a few rooftops. So that will help us with climate change mitigation. Thank you so much for your time and great work.
Thanks, Ann. And just a couple quick comments. Chris briefly mentioned University of Washington Evans School. So that's the one I kind of touched on, that we are working with a cohort of graduate students at UW this quarter and next, so essentially the first half of 2024. And they're really doing a review of other cities' programs that are focusing on tree giveaway and incentives for tree, maintenance and other tree care on private property. So they will be presenting back to the city. That'll be incorporated in the urban forest management plan, essentially recommendations of different approaches for programs like that. And it sounds like sustainability would potentially even have a little funding in the next biennium to implement something like that too. So so that kind of touches your to your point on the kind of programs like Bellevue and some of our other cities has. And then absolutely leaning into some of the existing information out from other groups around native plant selection, noxious weed control. I think it's really trying to figure out how we can best synthesize that, make that available, and fill some of the gaps in between how some of the different agencies and organizations focus on forestry work.
Awesome. Great work. Thank
I
you.
will come to the room. I see Jamie and Don. I'm not sure who went first, and then we'll go back to the screen and get to.
I'll slide over it. So thank you, Don and Chris, for bringing this to us. A couple quick things. First, I would just echo what Nancy had said about other stakeholders and partnerships being super important. So how that makes its way to the plan seems like an area maybe more attention. Also, ecosystem understory health being critical. I mean, I actually am encouraged by the riparian area. I think that's a really interesting approach of it's still not talking about understory, but starting to apply trees to ecosystems, which I think is ultimately in a lot of cases, there's obviously going to be street trees and other things, but I think that's a good starting point for something that is more applied to ecosystems. So other thoughts, I do think that this plan in general has a bit of a marketing branding problem, like urban, the word urban to me, I think street trees, I don't think like the forested hillsides. So I do think whatever we can do to make sure that people aren't just thinking about street trees when we say urban forest, like I would question why we have the word urban in there, but there's probably a good reason for that. But I just think that leads people to think in a certain way, and it might, people don't know where the edges of Issaquah are, so they might think that they might not know where you're talking about. So that's one other thing. How do you set context for like, what is Issaquah's forest look like today? And I think that's both area as well as some of the things you're mentioning around like potential risks. And I'm not sure how you do this, but if you already have it for forest stewards, that there's things like, we've already done studies on the invasive cover. There's certain issues that are known, and how do you provide context on the things that aren't in their face? So I think there's maybe some opportunity there. And I do think that just making sure that they're clear on what we're talking about with an urban forest management plan is important. I think one idea that I really liked from the community survey that is not necessarily in this survey is asking the question of what is important and how is the city delivering on it, and being able to directly tie those across. Like there's so many city presentations I've seen where you can tie, okay, this is important to people and it's poorly served. And so right now we ask that this is important. And then we ask overall, how are we doing on forest health? But we don't actually have a direct tie. So we might get a bunch of responses. This is really important. And we might already be doing really great on those things. So that actually isn't identifying the areas that you put more focus into. So I think that, yeah, that's probably the biggest thing, is just making sure that we have really actionable feedback coming out the other end. So I think something that is more granular on how are we doing might help with that. So yeah, thanks, Dan.
Jamie.
Me? Okay. I think you're off to a great effort. And I'm very encouraged to see that you've leveraged stormwater aspects into it, and you're going to partner with your public works department. And there's a lot there that you can benefit from. I'm not going to echo what everybody else said about the understory. You've heard enough there. I'll just remind you that a successful forest management plan looks at all tiers of the canopy, all the way from the ground to the top. And then the one thing I didn't see in here, Dan, is the forest edge. You have a lot of city property with a lot of private property adjacent to it. And you're going to hear a lot of gripes from neighbors about hazard trees and trees of concern. You need some aspect in there to adjust that. It might be there, I just didn't see it.
I think that falls into some of the overall, obviously, risk management conversations we've had, but yeah, that's a specific call out. And I think last time I was here, I said this, and I still haven't done this. I would love to GIS at some point the amount of public forest perimeter we have next to private property. It's a lot. So, I mean, you're right. I mean, that's a good chunk of what I do, especially this time of year, is working with those neighbors.
It becomes a high liability once you develop a forest management plan. There's expectations that go along with it, that forest is now being managed by the city, and the city becomes liable for those trees.
It's done.
Great point. Yep, that forest edge is critical, both in its vulnerability to invasives and how we manage that. But then you're right, the relationship to the private and our sort of responsibility and liabilities, as you said.
All All right, Tim, you're up.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the great presentation. And most of my concerns have been touched on already by some others. Primarily, trees do not equal a forest. So the understory question is important, but the presentation and the way we talk about things tends to sort of use the term trees and forest interchangeably. And I think it's important that those two terms be acknowledged as having different meanings. So one question that has not come up is, do we have a model for what a healthy forest for Issaquah looks like? Meaning X number of cedars, big leaf maples, Doug firs. What does that look like? Because otherwise we could overemphasize a particular species versus another. And what's sort of like the goal of what an Issaquah forest we want it to look like. So I think that's an important sort of guiding light for when we start looking at what trees you put where and how you intersperse them. As to the survey, I think it's great you're doing the survey, getting as much input as you can. I am sensitive to surveys in the fact that you have to be very careful to ask unbiased questions to get the information you're really looking for. So I hope somewhere along the line you have some people that have some background on formulating unbiased questions so that you're not leading people to the answer that you want to get. It's kind of an art, part science, but it's an important part of the process when you do a survey. And my last point or question is around funding. With the vision that's being put forward on what we're going to do to manage the Issaquah urban forest, does it line up with anticipated funding? It's great to have a great idea, but if it's out of the budgetary capabilities, then it doesn't do a lot of good. So I just want to kind of see how it falls within that framework. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I guess kind of on the model forest thing, I think it's still important to kind of look at trees in the built environment, and a very clear recommendation that will be in this plan is a need for a tree inventory. So this, once again, to be clear, is talking usually more about street trees, trees that maintain park areas. We don't have a good sense of, what percentage of trees from certain families. And I think, as most of you know, I mean, trees, the closer related they are, the more likely they're susceptible to the same disease, pest, pathogens, all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, you'll see guidance of, having less than 10% of trees from the same genus, used as street trees, as, we're concerned around emerald ash borer and other, pests that are making their way out to the West Coast. In terms of our natural areas and forests, that's a good question. I've been doing this work, more so in those areas for the past decade, and have a pretty good visual in my head, but I've never actually seen that clear in writing. And I think, the main takeaway there is biodiversity, the more different species. And once again, this comes back to what you all are talking about too, both at the level of canopy, but also, within our tree species is, looking at biodiversity at the species level and also at the genetic level is kind of really where a lot of the field is moving in terms of the climate adaptation and looking where we actually source our plants for and what they're adapted to in terms of their genetics. So that kind of answers the first part of it. I maybe for now will hold off unless Jeff or Chris wants to add anything on, kind of model forest, funding, things like that, all things that we're going to be, working on to kind of build out both internally, certainly through grants that the state provides. There's a really good opportunity through DNR to build out a tree inventory and some work there, but I wouldn't say I have a perfect answer for you on that one right now. But
yeah, maybe I can touch real quick on the funding question. It's a really good one. I would say that's never a static question. Funding's always going to be a dynamic reality. Something I was going to say at the end, but I'll say now. A little bridge comment. We're talking about an urban forest management plan, our first one. We're also talking about a park plan update. Park plan updates matter. This is a 2018 plan. It's pretty tattered. This is my copy. One of our operational strategies was initiate green Issaquah in an urban forest management plan. So when this was adopted in 2018, we really started telling that story. We didn't have the operational capacity. We didn't have the funding. to do that, and starting to tell that story, be an extension of the community voice of why this is important. I think we can see we've made a lot of progress. And so I would say that funding question is not static. As we tell the stories, we ignore the importance of truly managing and stewarding a forest that is not static in itself. It's constantly dynamic. That's, we're going to continue to be sort of having those conversations with not only city resources needed, but how those city resources can leverage other grants. Again, kudos to Dan, but kudos to the community. The park plan starts to tell some really, really important stories that we're seeing some really demonstrated progress in both Green Issaquah and our first urban forest plan.
All right, we'll move on to with that segue to the park system plan update.
I guess it was a segment.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
All right. Thanks everyone for your time and the questions. Take care.
And yeah, thank you, Dan. Thank you, everybody. I just want to echo one thing. I'm sorry, Chris. Understory matters. You're absolutely right. And whether it's I think the feedback we've already gotten, what we're learning through Green Issaquah. Dan is not only leading this effort, but our volunteer coordinator who leads Green Issaquah is also under Dan's charge. So like we already have some symmetry and understanding how we're launching Green Issaquah, how we're sort of leaning into removal of invasives, health of understory is going to be that's going to be data that's right in line with this work as well. So really appreciate everybody's comments and really many of you drove that point home, and it's absolutely true. So with that,
Let's go. And Chris, can I just ask you to, oh, there we go. Give me 1 second and I will share.
Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Dan. So maybe while this is getting teed up, thank you, Park Board, Environmental Board. So great to have you here. Park Board, this is an extension of a number of our conversations, but great to have Environmental Board enter into this. We had a survey go out to the community. Speaking of surveys, over 750 responses, great feedback. Had a great discussion last month with the Park Board around that survey feedback. Began to sort of prop up what was 6 themes that were discussed at the last meeting. Your feedback has really, I think, driven and scaled this down to sort of 4 themes we want to consider. Robin's going to sort of walk through these. We really are looking forward to a very facilitated discussion that I think speaks to one of the really, really important elements of Issaquah's park system. And that's this community wants its park system to do multiple things. This park system is essential in stewardship, ecological, environmental conservation goals that have long existed in Issaquah. And that's a key role of this park system. But another key role of this park system is livability and quality of life. And the community wants athletic fields and courts and playgrounds and all sorts of that other stuff. And I think our goal tonight is to really hear from all of you what a great representation of residents who feel both of those are really, really important. How do we best balance those? And how do we recognize our canvas here in Issaquah is not, it's not land rich. We're extremely land constrained as a town and a city. So just look forward to a really good discussion and helping us begin to really start framing up and create projects and priorities within these themes. So thanks for that intro, Robin. Take it away. Yeah.
Thank you. I got you. Okay. All right. I do. Okay. Yeah, great.
So I know that the park board knows a lot about the park system plan update and why we're doing it. We thought we'd update the environmental board to let you know why we're doing the plan, what its purpose is, and what it can achieve for us in the future. So park system plans are created and updated every 6 years. We're at our 5th year, so that's why we're doing the update right now. Adopted park plans ensure eligibility for state and federal level grants, which we go for, I believe, almost every year on those, especially in King County. And then the goals and policies are incorporated into the city's comprehensive plan, and the comprehensive plan comes as part of the state's Growth Management Act. So our park element is in there. I think there's an environmental element that I just reviewed. So it's a pretty critical piece of every part of the plans in the city. This can guide the community's goals and visions for the park system. We don't do this alone. It's definitely part, it's really the community's visions, our goals, and what they want for the park system. So it's really a reflection of the neighborhoods and residents' needs. Includes quite a bit of public participation for comments and feedback. We've done a survey. We've done focus groups. We're about to go back out for another mapping exercise. So we're really enjoying connecting with the community and learning more about what they need. This will establish a level of service, which again speaks to grant opportunities and alternative funding sources. And this helps us to establish the goals and policies that help guide the parks, and especially the planning team, when we're making decisions and setting priorities and projects for the next 6 years. So at our last session in January, we came to the park board with, I believe, 6 themes. And from the feedback we heard, it was a lot of overlap in those themes. So we came, let's see if we could review those. It was connections, park amenities, athletic fields, acquisition strategy, environmental protection and stewardship, and partnerships. So this came from a lot of the feedback we heard from the community and the focus groups, and these are the key elements that we pulled out. Park board asked us, because there was so much overlap, and to condense those a little bit more into 4, and we came up with pretty much 4 main themes. We're looking at system connections, which is system-wide connectivity between the parks, trails, open spaces, and surrounding public lands. That ties back into the green necklace, but we're also looking at those social and economic connections that parks provides. So we're not only looking at your physical well-being, but mental and social well-being as well. Making sure that enriches and kind of enhances our quality of life and fulfills a thriving community here. We're looking at system resiliencies. So again, tying back into what Dan was saying about the urban forest, future adaptability of systems that can respond to climate change and environmental pressures. And back to what Jeff was saying, because we are land constrained, our parks are going to have to serve multiple purposes now. So we want to focus on protection and stewardship still of our natural and open spaces, and securing, enhancing, and creating habitat where we can. And that's a personal philosophy of mine. If we take it out, we want to put it back even better or more if we can. We're balancing the environment and recreation by creating systems that coexist. Again, this is going to be really important moving forward in the future, that we have that balance, we reset some priorities, but we're also meshing the environment and the active recreation together as much as possible. System capabilities, maximizing utilization and optimizing functionality of park spaces for multi-use amenities, and acquiring a diverse range of spaces that remain dynamic for future recreational trends and conservation opportunities. Again, serving multi-purposes, multi-use activities, but meshing the two together as much as possible. And our last one was partnerships and inclusion. So we want to make sure we have access to high quality parks, cultural celebrations, and amenities across different neighborhoods and populations, making sure that disadvantaged communities have the same opportunities as other areas in the city. So we want to be fostering local and state collaborations and partnerships to expand system opportunities. Again, we're going to be looking at other partnerships. We're going to be looking at school districts so we can expand our athletic field capabilities among other amenities as well.
Can I focus on one real quick? Great overview, Ron. You know, the system connections is really big. We hear over and over again in this community, not only connectivity from a trail standpoint, but really, and not just in the city, but how our system really is that gateway to the public lands around us. So I got here in 2016. The Green Necklace was a vision within the Central Issaquah plan. I think as we hear more and more from the survey, we've had this conversation with the park board. We really think this plan's an opportunity to brand and identify that necklace. And when we hear the mix of definitions in this community, the Green Necklace really is about the entirety of the city. It really is thinking of the system in its entirety. It's what would it look like to really be ambitious and say, let's make every park connected. Let's create a network that is both in city and connects to the public lands around us. So just want to emphasize that point that in some ways that system connection piece is an opportunity to really brand and define the system and not just Central Issaquah. So taking that idea of Green Necklace out of Central Issaquah and into really the whole city. Thanks, Roman.
Did you want to do the next slide or?
Sure, I can touch on that.
Okay.
At least, yeah, kick it off.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, sure.
A little improv.
Sure. You don't want?
No, I don't mind. I don't mind. I think this is sort of a launching of some of the questions we have in the conversation and something that we within the Parks Department really feel compelled to try and balance. And this becomes a really, really hard balance in any town, right? In any city, you know, a park system. And Jamie, I think your questions were so spot on. Thank you, right? Where you were asking, hey, what is our parkland? Right. And when you look at Issaquah's parkland, if you had a chance to look at the classifications and the work that we've been drafting with the park board and how we define and classify each park, a vast majority of our acreage is open space. Right. And that's really important. And that's not rare. But this reality and this graph that Robin put together is really meant to maybe highlight the tug and pull. We want to really try and balance these values, but at times, if we're not careful, these values can compete against one another. You can have this, oh my gosh, our park system needs to be all about resiliency. When you think of resiliency, the conservation, environmental, ecological, climate goals that this community has, and we really need to have and prioritize. Along with a strong desire that this community has, both current residents and new residents, hey, we need athletic fields for our kids. Hey, we need playgrounds in our neighborhood. Hey, we need dog parks. Hey, we need stuff. So we have to act as a developer as we're doing those as well. If you take a look at our park classifications, you're going to notice something that we really want to emphasize, and it's that honest look in the mirror. Less than 10% of our acreage is community parks, neighborhood parks, or linear parks. And those three classifications are really our developed parks. That's a really, really small percentage of our park system. And that's not to say, oh my gosh, we're in crisis, but it means we're in deficit of those parklands that can provide those active amenities that the community wants. And so again, not trying to create crisis in this, but really as we jump into the four questions, just wanted you to sort of think of this graphic and really want to invite some of your feedback, your thoughts. Which of these maybe are a higher priority to you? Do you see cities as you visit other communities, other cities that feel like they've done a good job of meshing this balance? And maybe just any feedback you might have. Because I think this idea of we need to be both a resilient and a vibrant park system, we really want that to be a central message of this park plan update.
Oh, that's great. Yes.
Where is that? Where are the park classifications that you mentioned?
I need to send that to the environmental board.
Okay.
So we
Oh,
will,
okay.
yeah, we'll share that
Okay.
shortly.
Oh.
But also, I have a couple copies that we can pass around too.
hard copies. We'll make, sorry, Jay, we were putting those together today. I know the park board had a chance to see those, but we'll certainly include these in the meeting minutes. And again, hopefully and stoke further conversation, not just tonight.
That's kind of a good segue into the next slide, talking about planning and design principles that we'll be undertaking that seek to balance that vibrancy and that resiliency in that system. And I think this is where we can overlap with public works, we can overlap with the other plans coming up, but it feels like what we're hearing and what we're finding is we have a lot of the same priorities as some of the other elements. So now it's a matter of meshing those together when we go back into design. And we kind of have 6 principles that I look at, that our consultants look at when we go into design. We're looking at the cultural and physical kind of capabilities of the property, whether it's developed already or undeveloped. We really want to take a good look and do a feasibility study. We're going to be looking at promoting multimodal connectivity throughout the city. Again, that goes back into our idea of the green necklace, every park connected, every trail connected, and making sure that people feel comfortable and safe, and have an alternative way to move around in the city. Next one, multifunctional amenities. We want to consolidate recreational amenities into sites that can provide multi-use functionalities. We can potentially reduce land footprint in critical resource areas where we need to, and redevelop and look at redeveloping existing parks to function a lot better. Again, land constraint, we have certain minimal land available for active recreation, so we want to maximize those to the extent possible. We want to be proactive in park and trail design that can integrate sustainable and maintainable materials and vegetation. Again, that goes back to, can we afford and can we budget for that maintenance capability? And we want to plan for parks that have a synergy with natural weather cycles. Again, what we're finding that potentially could become more extreme, and we want to make sure our parks can handle that either way. So we're looking at stormwater management, drought tolerant plants, and kind of doing a shift looking forward. Next one, again, tying back into climate change and adaptation. We're looking at utilizing new plant palettes that are coming out, again, tying back into Dan's urban forestry concepts, and making sure that our riparian areas are active and healthy and performing that stormwater management that we needed to do. We want to increase forested coverage in natural areas to mitigate erosion and rising temperatures. That also goes for our street trees and our urban forests, more urban areas. The more trees we have, we can combat that heat island effect and pull those temperatures down. And reduce impervious areas or mitigate with pervious materials, which is something we'll be looking at more and more in the future and working with Public Works on that. Low impact development, big buzzword right now, particularly with stormwater management, but I kind of view low impact development as a holistic approach, looking at buildings, looking at structures, again, rooftop gardens, things like that, or solar, just looking at other opportunities. It goes along with our plant palettes, the vegetation, as well as stormwater management. So it's a lot of different characteristics, a lot of different layers, all combined together. And of course, we want to design parks and systems that are dynamic and resilient, not only for the social aspect, but for the environmental aspect as well. Green infrastructure are one of my favorite topics. We're going to be looking at integrating viral retention and stormwater management into our designs. And that's something that we can kind of fit in around active areas or active recreation areas. Again, choosing green and sustainable materials and vegetation to decrease stormwater runoff and increase canopy coverage to reduce heat island effects. Water conservation, just based on the rain today, you don't think we need to conserve water. But again, with climate change changing, that's going to be something that we'll look at more closely. So we want to design parks that minimize water usages and promote native or drought tolerant plantings. We want to choose materials that are permeable or promote infiltration. and utilize water-wise irrigation systems and reclaim water, which I know Rick and the operations team is already looking at and doing right now, and working with Public Works. So the best part is we get to start working with all the other departments on layering these ideas together with our projects together. So we had 4 questions we wanted to ask both boards tonight. The first one, do the 4 themes that we proposed represent the diversity of roles we need for the city park system to support the natural environment and the community? And we could roll back up to those 4 themes.
Why don't you just cover the 4 questions real fast, and then
Okay.
maybe we just open it up for.
Yeah.
Q&A.
Sure. What elements of the park system help support the climate action plan? What trends or practices have you seen in the park system that successfully balanced resiliency and vibrancy? And how do we improve functionality in the system while accomplishing the conservation efforts and practices? And this is something we talk about and struggle with every day. It is a big challenge. We'd love more input and more insight, and just it's a great conversation to have with everybody.
I'd seen Ann's hand up before, something.
Yeah. Yeah. Anne, I think you're first if you want to go. Okay.
Okay, cool. Way to go. Another great plan. And just one thing that pops out at me is we're better than all the other cities around with carbon sequestration because we have so many amazing forests. So that, I believe, is, we've got question number 2, what elements of the park system can help support the climate action plan? So that's actually, in my mind, mitigation, climate change mitigation, because we're hanging on to and sequestering carbon in our forests. So we're helping the whole world with the forest. And so maybe that's something we could call out a little bit more. And then another thing, I know I said this before, but this is actually the right space for it. The distributed energy, solar panels is what comes to my mind first, but maybe some storage eventually. Maybe on all of the buildings and really visible out there in our parks and in the community, not just because, for 2 reasons, because it helps people see that we're actually doing something. Climate change is it's especially hard on the younger generation psychologically. And so when the kids are at the parks at their games and they see that the city is actually doing something, they've got clean energy that they're distributing and creating, it makes people feel really good. So we could do 2 things at once. And then I wasn't sure if you wanted to add wildlife corridors in there someplace. And I guess that's it for me. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ann. I'm looking at Stacy as I say this. We're a few months away from we'll have our first bay of solar panels on the community center. So again, as step 1 of a rather big public demonstration of clean energy opportunities in our buildings. I know that was something we've been talking about pre-pandemic, and here we are about to see it come to fruition. So.
Yeah, and PSC also has a community solar program for open spaces, so that's something I can.
So those are on
Awesome.
top, those are on top of those community.
Those will go
centers?
on top of the community center. It's a community solar project, so it's not it's not for the community center. Community members will be able to subscribe to it.
Cool. Well, thank you. The more we can have of that, the better.
I think I'm next. I don't really have a response necessarily to these questions. I have more of a question to you. So many of the low impact, with experience in developing parks, learned that many of the low impact and green infrastructure, EMPs, as they're called, are often difficult to get to work or get to work properly or to be maintainable. But that doesn't reduce the importance of trying to improve those and learning from them. Especially with the new Chapter 18, or Title 18, or Chapter
18.
Yeah, Title 18 requirements regarding trees and tree coverage canopy coverage requirements. It seems like that would be a strong promoter for any development, including park projects, to encourage basically massive planting of trees, or much higher level of planting of trees. But it could also be sort of a challenge when you're trying to create a large park area, like an athletic field, where the requirements may burden what's available and what you're trying to accomplish. And so where I'm getting to is, my question is, have you guys encountered this challenge with, essentially the accounting of usable park space as compared to now current requirements for canopy coverage? And how has that impacted you? Because even if you're planting trees in every corner of something, you might still be constrained. So you may not know the answer now, but I'm really curious about how that's.
No, it's a great example, Chris, of the very thing that matrix we're saying. Is we want to do both, but we haven't faced the new Title 18 yet in terms of a project and submitting an application for it, but we know we will. We've already been in conversation with planning about how do we accomplish both. I think many in this room are probably already aware, last year we planted about 20,000 trees. We're going to plant another 20,000 this year. So we are stewards within the entirety of the park system. The conversations we're having with planning is, how do we see and understand that every parcel isn't the same, right? Tibbetts Valley Park or Central Park and the synthetic turf fields up there have a really important role to play. That's sort of density, that multi-use, and the more multi-use we get, the better we can sort of serve and protect the rest of the park system. And so I think as we look at our next 1, 2, or 3 sort of larger park projects and have to apply that, we're already trying to pose those questions to planning, and how do we sort of recognize, as stewards of the park system, our right hand and left hand are trying to work complementary. We're trying to plant trees and protect the forest, while at the same time understanding there's certain large parcels that probably we can't plant a forest in a multi-use athletic field. And so its application is still to be figured out. But planning is certainly very understandable of our intent and our desire to do both. I think another more direct example that maybe isn't to the new Title 18, but I think represents the balance we're trying to make, is Hillside Park. Without going into too many examples, we should be out to bid here in the next couple of weeks. But if you recall, Park Board knows this, Hillside Park, neighborhood park, community up there has wanted neighborhood park amenities within that. Other community members, not so much. Brenda knows this. She's a neighbor. We have proposed some neighborhood park improvements at Hillside Park that are going to really strike that balance. But in that work, we discovered that play field, that ball field, also had a very isolated, non-functioning wetland on it. And so not trees specifically, but it's like, how do we accomplish this goal of resiliency and vibrancy? We need that wetland to function, but it's functioning very poorly when it's also trying to be a field. And so in that work, we ended up fully mitigating that wetland. So we're about to create a wetland down on Issaquah Creek on the Park Point property. Again, thinking of the whole system, we're going to end up with a better functioning wetland that's connected to the creek, and the neighborhood's going to have a better functioning field in its neighborhood park. And so I think as we move ahead with projects, whether it's trees, but looking at Title 18, I think we're gonna need to be very creative in how we're, again, trying, as Robin said, have this goal of vibrancy in the park system, but also environmental resiliency. We're gonna need to get really uber creative in how we maybe have to separate them to have them work better together. That makes sense.
So using a lot of those small pockets to help compensate or offset for.
Yeah.
And I guess it's similar.
Thinking of the whole system and its function.
And could we put those trees somewhere else and still accomplish the same goal? Could we trade that off with more pollinators in those little pocket areas instead? So still, there's that ecological benefit to that. It's just,
Let's
being
meet the
super
intent,
creative.
let's make the system better, but also part of making that system better is we need active recreation areas to function really well too.
Yeah, and just to touch on it, what triggered that thought for me was not everybody received the classification table, or now everybody has it in one form or another, but the number that jumped out was, so we have 85% essentially of open space, and that's great, but we also have these other pressures from, vast percentage of the population that wants these active recreation uses. So how do you accomplish both goals in balance? This is where I was going.
Really good, Chris. And you're right, our system, I would say when we benchmark that percentage breakdown with other cities, we're under-prescribed in community park and neighborhood park spaces. And that's not to say, what was us? That's just to say, hey, we're gonna really need to get creative in how we accomplish both.
We've got Tom first, then Brad, and then we'll come to Jamie and then Nancy.
Okay, thank you. Tom Anderson here. A lot of great themes here of the park system elements. I just want to focus on one that's near and dear to my heart, and that is the multimodal transportation element and how the green necklace can couple into that, providing new corridors of multimodal transportation. We have a transportation problem here in Issaquah, and often when it's discussed, well, what to do, we just wring our hands and unsure about what to do, because our options for producing more roads are very limited. Our options for producing more multimodal corridors are there's many more of those, and this has been a part of my life. I have bicycles, and if I want to zip into town to do an errand during rush hour, I can accomplish that little errand on my bike more quickly than I can getting on my car. This is a fact, and it has affected my behavior. And I think that this is an increasing condition for many residents in town, and providing the opportunity to get where they need to go through a multi-modal corridor on non-motorized vehicles is something we need to really work on. And so I look forward to where we can go with that here with the park system plan. And I guess part of so the question I wanted to make that point, but then ask the follow-on question: how does that couple in with the park plan versus transportation plan? I mean, these things kind of go together. How is that balanced out in the preparation of the related plans? Thank you.
So, yeah, well, thanks, Tom. I'll touch on that really fast. It's both, but starting with the park system plan, and it sounds like you would agree. We feel like the green necklace, again, needs to be taken out, but broadened beyond just central Issaquah. The green necklace really should encompass the whole system, and we really want to take the opportunity to, for this park plan update, to really give it a definition that is system-wide. That definition is, and this gets to what I was saying about both, is how do we prioritize and find those off right-of-way trail connections, utilizing existing corridors, et cetera, but realizing that system-wide, every park connected vision is going to also need key right-of-way, on right-of-way, in right-of-way, pedestrian connections, multimodal connections. And so that's where we will be working very closely with Public Works and the transportation folks in making sure that new green necklace, I hesitate in saying that name, that new brand of sort of system-wide, citywide connectivity. Public Works is involved in that. So as they're doing their transportation mobility planning, transportation prioritization for their capital projects, they're really thinking of not just park projects, but those connectivity projects, so that the sidewalk system isn't a separate set of infrastructure from these connectivity goals. They're really complementary. So more work ahead for us to make sure those talk to each other a whole lot better than I think they have over the last 20, 30 years.
Okay, thank you.
I think you're next.
Did you say my name?
Sure did.
Okay. Thanks. So I like it all, and I like the 4 themes. I guess the thing that I might like to perhaps see incorporated into one of the themes in system resilience might be something related to wildlife. You know, there's certainly, we have importance of wildlife, but I'm not seeing wildlife actually captioned anywhere, and that might be a good place to put it in conjunction with habitat. And that might be also in conjunction with understory and all of that. But, you know, wildlife corridors, wildlife related to habitat, all important elements to this. Regarding the climate, the second one with climate action plan, you know, Jeff has made lots of really great comments tonight about connectivity. And I think, frankly, that's really a huge contribution to the climate action plan if we can really solve the connection aspect to it, because it takes so many more cars off the road. People have access to all the parks and trails and everything, and just I just really think that would help substantially, in addition to, you know, improving the tree canopy. You know, one thing sticks out to me when I see this comment: what trends or practices have you seen in park systems? I'm not sure whether this comment belongs in that one or the next question, but you know, when I travel around and look at national park systems, for instance, a couple things, and state park systems as well, a couple things that stick out to me that would be really nice at some point to implement within our park system is more interpretive elements, because that's a kind of an educational component for the community and as it relates to our parks. And interpretive elements can be signage. Interpretive elements can be interpretive specialists like the state park, you know, puts on for the community. And I know our park ranger is starting to do a little of that. It'd be nice to expand on that somewhat. You know, and this is really way out there, I suppose, but you know, as we're growing into the Trail City and all, it'd really be nice to give some consideration at some point to actually having a visitor center, someplace, you know, central within our park system that the community could go to have access to a lot of educational elements, and could really recognize, you know, how they can contribute to, you know, our landscape and what is available. You know, a lot of times, you know, you can go online and actually maybe see something, but to actually have a central location, maybe, you know, in conjunction with the green necklace, that could be a hub to some extent, and an opportunity for people to have a bit of a visitor center situation. I love the visitor centers that are conducted by the National Park System. And that's a down the road vision, but something to maybe plant the seed that it would really be nice to incorporate within our system at some point. So thanks.
Thanks, Fred.
Jamie?
Awesome. Thank you. No, appreciate you bringing this to us, and great to see the progress you guys have made. First of all, I love the idea of connectivity between all I mean, that's one of the things I love about Issaquah, connectivity to all the parks that we have, the undeveloped spaces. I do think that's a theme that I want to talk a bit more about, which is, I think Issaquah, we've, as a city, I think, chosen that we want to have a lot of open natural green space. So it's a little worrisome to hear like that because we have 85% natural or undeveloped land basically, or within our park system, that gives us, you know, like that we need to go fill the gap or anything. I think I think there's plenty of spaces already semi-developed or in central Issaquah. I think we should look at the way we develop our parks system to an extent, how we've looked at how we develop our city, which is we have central Issaquah, we have areas that we want to put development where it's easy to get to, where there's going to be a lot of people that have access to it. There's public transportation, et cetera. So I really think that is a theme that we should bring through. And so I don't think we're going to go like cut down all of Park Point or cut like that. I know that that's not, but I do think that doesn't necessarily give us, in some ways, I think it actually, when you look at the fact that 85% plus of our park system is natural space, and we don't actually see nature in any of the 4 themes. We say them in the sub bullet, but we use, I mean, I think this is getting into feedback on that question of, to me, using the word system 3 times and not using the word nature once in those themes is an oversight. And I think if you actually look at what system resilience says, I think it says nature and supporting the environment. So I don't know why we don't just say that, because I do think that that's within our park system, one of the key kind of battles or kind of tug of wars that is a great tug of war to have, which is how do we give the services, the amenities that everyone wants, at the same time we promote nature. And so I think the fact that we don't say that is we should just call it what it is, which is that is about promoting resilience, promoting how we protect the environment. And so I think that's one piece of feedback on those themes. So going a little further down, I do think that in that vein, like how we look at even areas within our central Issaquah that are especially on Issaquah Creek, like how do we make sure that if we're going to improve a park, and I think the parks that Tom mentioned are great examples, like if we're going to add amenities for citizens, how do we make sure that we're also, it's in a critical area, how do we make sure that we're promoting and kind of paying the due that was acquired to be kind of to add connectivity along the creek? And so how do we make sure that not only are we developing in a way, but also like the way that people use it? I think Confluence is a great example of like, how are we encouraging and discouraging people from certain parts of the park? And how do we make sure that people are aware that these are, I mean, we say we put signs, but how do we make sure that there's like clear designations, both within the parks and within the, like our park system of what is for people and what is not for people, or what is for people in certain constraints on a trail versus running amok wherever they want to go. So I think that's something that I think we just, I would encourage and want to make sure that makes it into this. And I think it will. I'm already hearing conversation about the kind of that balance, which I think is the right word. And then I think the last thing that I wanted to mention is I will be really curious to see the connection between the urban forest management plan, how we look at, I mean, one of the biggest things that come to mind is like Sammamish Cove, and I don't actually know who, I think the city owns Sammamish Cove. Like if you look at satellite imagery of the city and you see like, where do we actually have space to add trees? Where do we have area? Like we have our crazy, like I think we have to add 380 acres to get to our 55% canopy cover, which is a whole, don't get me started on that. I'm not quite sure how we're going to do that, but like, if we look at the areas that we really have to like pick up canopy, pick up places that we can add habitat, that seems like a really great. So I think thinking about how those areas and how those two plans can tie together to, and it's kind of tying in the climate action plan as well. But those types of connections, I think, will be super important to make sure that I think that would be a great opportunity to have a bunch of wins for all sides on something like a Sammamish Cove Park, or there's other examples. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jamie, and please, everyone, both boards, please know my comment of the 85% isn't the problem. It's not a problem. It's a good thing. I'm just recognizing that the acreage we have right now for providing the active spaces that this community wants is underprescribed. That doesn't mean the parks director isn't saying, cool, we got to go take 85, we got to reduce that 85. We need to, you know, let's keep that percentage of open space. Let's understand some of our, it might mean we need to shift some of our acquisition strategies. I look back for the last 30, 40 years, we haven't been much of an acquirer of active developable land. We might need to do that. Developers don't gift that to the city. We might need to become a little bit more aggressive in that, right? So it's some of those approaches we need to be thinking of. And you're exactly right, Jamie, you know, how we maximize that existing developable community park neighborhoods, park spaces. You know, how do we do that in a fashion that realizes, and I'm glad you caught balance. You're absolutely right that we're looking for those wins. We're looking for that, as you said, ability for the system has to do both. This community wants the system to do both. I also appreciate your comment of nature, right? These themes are in draft form currently. We're not trying to.
Exactly. It's funny we call it urban forest, which almost to me is an oxymoron.
Yeah.
System and nature, which are almost like oxymoron. Like
it can
just
be,
seems like
but you're right. System could be thought of as built system. I think in my vernacular, I think of system as both natural and. But you're right. Words matter. So how do we make sure we're emphasizing? This is very much a natural system. And less of a built system. We got to be really smart and creative in how we do the built system. So such good feedback.
Yeah. Well, I really like your themes. I think you've done a great job with that. But the only thing I would suggest going along with Jamie's comment, take system out of each one of them. It's just the title is system connections. Let's call it connections. System resiliencies. Take system out of it and just say resiliency so that in your descriptions, you can describe what you're trying to achieve, but not put it in your titles, because really what you want to talk about is more than that.
Very good.
The second part, mine are kind of different ideas around things. One of the things people really like living here in Issaquah about, not just the parks and the nature, but the bears in your backyard. Oh, I saw a cougar today, or, you know. So we need to talk about wildlife, and that is one of the coolest things about Issaquah, and you see it on Facebook, everybody talking about some critter that showed up last night. So we need to include that as part of what we're trying to protect in our parks. Then my third theme for you is we have another big landowner in this community. It's called the school district. Somehow Bellevue has managed to work with their school district to put sports fields that are maintained by the city on school district properties. And I look at many of the school properties, Issaquah Valley Elementary is a prime example. It's locked when the kids are in school. Issaquah High, fields and stuff are locked. So we need to find, if we're looking for land, we have somebody that has developed facilities with big parcels of land that we need to build partnerships with and somehow find a way, following Bellevue's example, to multi-use some of that, just like they multi-use ours. That's happened. They've done it down at Dodds Fields down there with the school district. Little League did. Soccer has gotten in with the state parks and gotten that kind of accomplished. We need to find a way to get the city and the school district to work together.
Making some really, really good progress there. And I know Park Board will be talking really more specifically about our athletic field strategy in a couple Park Board meetings from now. But yeah, we outlined it as a goal in the 2018 plan. We've made some really good relationship strides in both of those groups. If we have time for director's report, I'm going to mention an update on the state park and Sam Cove Park. I'll touch on the school district as well, but great points, Nancy. You're right. We need to look at all public lands and really partner with the other public landowners. Yep.
I mean, if we're talking acquisitions, there are already publicly owned lands. We're all the same public that are paying for school district lands. So we need to find a way to work together.
Well, good.
Then Marlene, I saw your hand up. Well,
Oh yeah, I was going to build on a previous point. But I think, and I'm not sure exactly who said it in the room, but, really making sure that, as we do think about keeping Issaquah, which is, the great open spaces and the trails, and then really making the most out of the active recreation that we do have, and really focusing our attention on places that we can get to via transit, that we know are going to have more population density. I know we had a long conversation last month about Tibbetts. I think that is another, just for the environmental board to hear, like, we are thinking about where are those places where there's transit, where there's population growth planned, and where we already have, land acquired that we could make more use out of. So I think making the best use of what we already have is going to key priority that I think I'm hearing people say in different ways, but wanted to reiterate.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, we are wildly close to the end of our meeting.
Holy cow.
So, to any other comments on this particular subject?
One other quick one. One thing maybe to consider is as we develop parks, the materials we use have a significant carbon a significant carbon impact. And so I know that ultimately, like, there's a certain cost that you have some certain amount of money to spend on a given project, but that's just something to think about as we go about. This is not specific to parks, this is any city development, but like, what could help support a climate action plan? I don't think it's specifically laid out, but actually what will help, like, reduce greenhouse gas emissions is using materials that do that. So just something to keep in mind and consider.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Great discussion. Robin, do you want to quickly talk next steps? This is still a work in progress. Really good. And I want to thank Robin as well. Robin and Julie Casada, who's our senior park planner, Robin, who's our park planning manager, both came on board in the fall, jumping right into this. So they're fast work with the consultant team working on this. I really, in discussions like this, I think we're going to end up with a park plan update that really sets some really strong priorities for our next 6 years.
Yeah, so we started in May and July of last year with kickoff focus groups. In September, we looked at review and refinement of the classifications, which you'll get a copy of that. October through February, we've been looking at the goals and policies from our element plan and looking at our data input, mapping, and inventories. We're moving forward in the next few months with another community workshop, draft system plan update with a focus group review at the end of April. So look for another meeting coming up and another mapping exercise. And then in May, we're looking towards recommendations of the draft system plan update by the park board. We'll be back here again. And then to the Services, Safety, and Parks Committee, and hopefully City Council adoption by July is our goal. So we're moving through this pretty fast, but we're definitely open to more feedback and looking for more community engagement in the next few months.
Good.
Okay, it's time for reports. You have an item here, environmental board reports, and I don't know what those might be.
I think that's Stacy and Jamie.
Yeah, I'll be very quick since we're at time. So with the environmental board, we typically do some quick council updates. I will go ahead and send those in an email given the time now, but there are some upcoming meetings with council to be aware of with some topics of interest. Other quick updates is we've received a climate planning grant from Department of Commerce for $280,000. I'll send out an email to the board about what that grant is going to be covering. It's really to supplement a lot of work that we're doing and allow city budget to instead go towards purchasing equipment, for example, where the Commerce grants can help with a lot of the planning and facilitation work. Reminder that city board and commission recruitment is open. Please share with your networks. We have a number of positions opening up on the board. If your position is opening up, encourage you to reapply for another 4 years. And then just another reminder on the March 30th Sustainability Fair, Nick sent out a volunteer recruitment to the Environmental Board. Really encourage you all to get involved or at least attend. We can send that to the Park Board too if there's interest. And then just want to touch on the Environmental Board's next regular meeting is March 13th. We're planning to start a little bit early. Check. We're planning to start a little bit early. It is March 13th, Wednesday. Yeah. Hopefully Jamie's there. To allow for some extra time for discussion. Jamie will talk about that in just a moment. Our one topic we are going to be discussing is the transportation improvement plan and looking at the project criteria. And then we'll also be doing some follow-up discussion on the retreat.
You want to go a little bit, just quick, a little more on TIP, what we're going to be covering?
Sure. Great. So Transportation Advisory Board is meeting this Wednesday to talk about climate and environment criteria for vetting their projects. They will then be bringing that proposed criteria to the Environmental Board for discussion. That will inform the projects that go forward on their plan that they'll discuss in late March.
We are going to be covering.
So we will be talking about criteria. Yeah.
Cool. And just really briefly on follow-ups from the retreat, we are going to be going through basically a proposed kind of changes document that cover a lot of the main conversation points we had at the retreat and the feedback we had on the survey. So that's something we will review during our next meeting. So look forward to talking through that with them.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That goes over to you.
Sounds
Be
good.
quick.
Something, do you have I'll be super fast. You're good? Okay. You are good. Boy, I teed up state parks a little bit. Happy to go into more details next month with Park Board. State Parks has been going through a lot of staff changes in their park planning division in particular. The last couple of months, Robin and I have been meeting multiple times with state parks. Long and the short of it, they've statewide been looking at sort of reprioritizing all their projects that they have in the works. They shared with the Friends of Lake Sammamish group just a couple of weeks ago. I attended that with them. They have decided to stop, no longer proceed with, they had a master plan update that they were going to be doing for the state park. They're going to stop doing that and sort of reset back to the 2007 master plan that was adopted for the state park and really hold true to that as really the anchor and the vision for the state park, given its really key environmental role. Much more to come. They're going to be updating the State Park Commission, which is the statewide group in May, as to that approach. The relationship with the city is, I think, getting certainly stronger. They're going to have a more direct relationship with us within the Parks Department. Things such as athletic fields, as Nancy touched on, I know has been dear to a number of our Park Board members' hearts as well. How we approach that, how we get creative with the athletic field footprint there in the state park, much more to come. But they are not going to be proceeding with the bigger, broader master plan that started just before the pandemic. Sammamish Cove, lots happening with that city-owned parcel right next to state parks. I think Park Board knows this, Environmental Board, you may know this. There are 3 projects currently underway that are impacting that property. We are, as your representatives, as the landowner, making sure that those 3 proposed projects are in the end going to be a benefit to Sammamish Cove. WashDOT is proposing as part of their Fish Passage project, they want to align a new creek, or not a new creek, but align Schneider Creek through Sammamish Cove. I've got a meeting with them again tomorrow in making sure as they do that property is not encumbered or burdened, but is actually making sure that
Muting.
That's what I sound like. Making sure that in the end, that property is benefited from that. You may know a lot of that property has reed canary grass. We would love to see not only the WashDOT project. There's a development agreement that was done years ago. Certainly predates probably any of us in this room with Rowley for a stormwater pipeline to go through Sammamish Cove. We want to make sure as the city honors that development agreement that again, the property is benefited and the site is in a better condition because of that. So making sure restoration of the existing wetland as the creek is added, as this utility project is added. And then you may know also Northwest Sammamish Road, the road that goes along Sammamish Cove. That's a high priority transportation project. So as we're working with Public Works, making sure, again, Sammamish Cove is not harmed in that project, but is benefited. So interesting. Thanks for bringing that up, Jamie. It's a park property that is being challenged right now with a couple of other desired uses. We want to make sure that that property in the end is seen as a benefit to the site. That's it. I have a couple other updates, but they'll wait till next time. Lots going on.
Okay, thank you. So even though it is often one of the more encouraging and inspiring reports, we don't have the youth representatives today. You guys have them in your meetings?
Ashwin has
Hello.
Oh, you have one. Okay.
We are both here. We've been online.
Perfect.
Great,
Please
let me
go
go ahead, do your report. Welcome, sorry.
Okay, so I think Arshay also has some stuff to say as well, but we do have our State of Mind conference coming up on March 9th. And then we are also planning a ISSE Hacks, which is a hackathon for ages 13 to 17, I believe. I think it's supposed to be like, either 8th grade to like senior year of high school or like freshman to senior year, somewhere around that. It's supposed to happen sometime in May. And then we also are working on opening up the application, the whole application process for next year. Yeah.
And yeah, to add on, we have a couple more events coming up. So we have a career exploration event on Saturday, April 20th. It's at the Issaquah Community Center. And I think that one is mainly for high schoolers. It's kind of like to have them gain exposure to the different careers that are out there. And then a couple days after that is the middle school dodgeball tournament on Friday, April 26th, also in the Issaquah Community Center. And yeah, in the next couple months, that's what's coming up.
Can I ask one of you to, again, Youth Advisory Board, you do such great work. State of Mind Conference is a really big deal and something you've done. Maybe a 60-second overview of what it is, because it's very timely in what's going on with middle schoolers and high schoolers right now.
Yeah, so State of Mind Conference is basically where the youth board invites, the youth board specifically our advocacy part. We invite speakers to talk about different, pressing issues in like the teen community. For example, like mental health is a really big thing. So they have, speakers coming in that are talking about either their job concerns with, teens and mental health, or they have experience there. So they're coming to the conference. It's at Gibson Neck, I believe. And they're going to come, they're talking to teens and to adults even about, ways to either manage mental health or just basically whatever their profession is on the topic of mental health. Yeah. If that was.
Good. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Adults are welcome to, if you're ever interested. It's inspiring.
There's going to be a teen track this year and then a parent track as well. So if you're a parent of a teen and you want to attend, there will be sessions for you.
Also, I do have to drop off, and I believe Arshaya does as well. So
thanks so much for your reports.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good evening.
Care.
It's awesome that they were there. I'm sorry I didn't realize they were. Last one on the agenda is my report. We're gonna truncate it. The 6:30 caught me, but I have, because we always run out of time, it's just gonna be a list that I'm gonna send to Santi, and we'll do it that way. And generally, it's a calendar of events update. So that's what I'll do, and I'll send it out as an email, or you will. Do we have any other business or announcements? Okay,
Thanks.
I think we're good with that. We'll call the meeting adjourned, and 15 minutes over, but we're good. A lot of good stuff.
Thank you, Environment Board, so much for doing. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, all on the screen.